what I think has, and that's a negative thing, and that's a systemic change that needs to be activated. Something has to activate, and is an undercurrent, and that's happening. But what I think that it has done on the plus side is then given power back to them, say, okay, well then I can't think about a traditional career ladder, right? I can't sit and wait for a baby boomer to retire and create headroom for me in that organization. I'm going to be creative and innovate and either start my own job, figure out what my value is, my highest and best use, and monetize that. And they're doing that much younger than we did, and with much more kind of brashness and bravado to execute. And I respect that a lot, because it's you ask a Gen Xer and senior generations, and we grew up thinking there's a rite of passage.
Yeah.
You know, you start as an assistant, you move up to the next role, or wait for a title change. And they remind us that, what are you waiting for? You don't have to wait for anybody to give you permission to innovate or be creative. I love that.
I've also learned that in my interactions and work with this generation, they crave feedback. Mm-hmm. And I think there's a misnomer with the feedback, that they crave validation. Mm-hmm. And I remind people, I think their parents craved validation. Yeah. I don't see the millennials that work for me asking for pats on the back. They're constantly asking me, how can I improve? Mm-hmm. And again, that's not a please tell me I got a trophy like everyone else. So I feel like there's a bit of mythology. Recognition we find in our work and culture is one of the most desired culture values every time we measure it. If we measured it in any company by generation, but for this generation, one of the interpretations is, did you sit down with me and give me feedback?
Yeah.
And the annual performance review, out the door. Because if you're waiting on an annual basis to give a millennial feedback who's doing the incredible things you're talking about, they're gone. You and I would have had the patience to do it. Yeah. They're gone.
And we had the patience because we were told to, or we did in advance.
That's right.
Right. And that's the power they've taken back that I admire and wish existed 20 years ago, you know, for myself. But I do agree. I think that, you know, sitting and waiting for an annual review, you are going to lose. And now what it has reminded even other generations is you shouldn't wait for feedback. And I agree with you. I think there's a common misconception that it's a pat on the back. It's an entitled behavior. I think it is the parents that want the validation, but millennials that I work with and know really well, it isn't about validation, because that's not going to pay the bills. You know, they are monetizing something right now. They're monetizing their thoughts, their experiences, their networks, and they're doing that a much better way than we did. I mean, we're coming along slowly because we were told to move slowly, but that validation can't affect monetization of all those things. It has to be, okay, how do I improve this? You know, what do you like about that? And what could I do differently? And should I bring other people in the room? Right. And teaching millennials, learning. And this is where I think groups that I've known, you can learn from one another in collaboration and teamwork, that I think other generations have promoted a little bit, with a bit more experience, that are kind of bringing down channel to millennials that do feel alone and having started careers, as single shingles. And helping them figure out how they engage a community in a digital world, right? And because that's a very different framework than we grew up with. It's like we didn't have communities in a digital space. We relied on actual human community. And they are navigating something that none of us as digital natives have ever seen before.
That's right.
You know, and that's pretty interesting to me. And I watch that kind of from the side, and cause I have the nice, I kind of sit, my families I work with, the younger generation, still like me because they think I'm younger than I am, and that's great. And then the senior generation like me because I have experience. So I get to sit in this nice catbird seat of navigating the digital network and the human network. And I love that. I wouldn't trade this time for anything.
I agree with that too. One of the trends that's ripping in culture across all generations, is the Me Too movement, which I will also link up to just the equality of women. And we've spent time with every CEO and leader we've sat with talking about what does this mean. Can you share your perspective on the Me Too movement and equality of women? And what is your advice to other CEOs and leaders about this moment we are living through right now?
It's a long overdue movement or attention to, again, how we exploit or discriminate others. And so I go back to the basic tenet of exploitation, in whatever form that takes, whether it's sexual harassment that's linked to Me Too, and then more overt tragic circumstances. I think one of the things I fear, and I operate in a world in my industry that is heavily male dominant, right? And so what I hope doesn't happen from the Me Too movement is the fear of engaging women in the workplace, just because it would appear binary that, if I include them, then this is the outcome. Right. And I don't want to see that happen. I think of every person as an individual and should be, viewed on their merits for whatever work they're producing, and whether they're male or female or transgender or, all of the, I think all the boxes we're checking now. Right. And so I fear from the movement, which is a necessary movement, that the pendulum doesn't swing such that because men are still in the power seat by numbers and in control of outcomes of corporations, that I hope that it doesn't limit the pipeline that I mentioned earlier in the conversation about how do we cultivate young female professionals so that when there is headroom, you actually have a universe that isn't just dominated by one gender. And so I think the Me Too movement can be helpful to that, to kind of shedding a light on, engaging women in the workplace in the ways that they want to be engaged in, for work and not for other purposes.
I want to pull it up a higher level and ask you a question, because you have worked in so many incredible organizations and I feel your leadership here. What is your definition of leadership? What is a leader in your mind?
For me, it takes a lot of forms, but at the end of the day, if I can help motivate or influence action, and whether that's action, with peers as part of a collaborative exercise, whether that's action that I've identified in my client segment that, taking their motivators and helping them, and take action against those so they have outcomes and goals that they achieve. That's leadership. So helping inspire action. And, it's not a push down, method of leadership. It's really more inclusive, I would say. So this helps elevate others. And that's largely what I built Pomona Society around, the nonprofit organization, and really is to bring, a multi-diverse set of, a group of women together as leaders and elevate their voice as leaders, and inspire them to continue activating around a particular cause.
So I was going to go there with you on the Pomona Society. I think every organization exists to solve a problem. Non-for-profit, for-profit, there's problems. And the question to you is, what problem, first of all, what is the problem, and why were you attracted to solving this problem through the Pomona Society?
So to me, the problem is poverty. And a growing wealth gap is exacerbating poverty. So poverty in Washington is among the highest in the country on a per capita basis. So as I mentioned, my personal background, I'm drawn to figuring out how we can change systems that are in place that will keep the phenomenon of growing poverty in place, right? So to me, it is about a next generation, approach. And, I focus on women in Pomona Society at the start. It's not to say that you fast forward 10 years and it's not a male organization or a blended, but primarily because women express the largest numbers of those living in poverty and as single female-headed households, in Washington. And so for me, because I've had the experience with my, kind of my profession, and then also have spent so much time in charitable work, have come to the conclusion that in a place-based initiative, there lacks, kind of the connective tissue of enterprise, which is the for-profit world that has a role to play in alleviating alleviating poverty in this case. and nonprofit enterprises also have a role